Hello, everyone, and welcome to our podcast today on the topic of how to hit the ground running during a pandemic. I'm Alicia Gailliez, BD Manager at Nucleus, and I'm delighted to be co-hosting this podcast alongside Simon Portman, Managing Associate at Mark Law, and Colm Ryan, Co-founder and CEO of ReagentGenie. So the topic for today's discussion is going to be around how ReagentGenie have made a transition from research only to a diagnostic product, and more specifically, a rapid COVID-19 test. So Simon and Colm, I'm delighted to be here with you both today, and I'm really looking forward to sharing more about this story and also understanding more about the challenges, the logistical and regulatory considerations along the way. And I just wanted to highlight that as Nucleus is a non-for-profit membership group for the life sciences, this is actually the type of story that really resonates with us and of course our members. And it's at times like these that the value and the role of the life science sector really is apparent. So, Colm, to start us off, I wondered, could you just provide a bit of background to the company sort of prior to moving into the rapid COVID-19 testing?
Yeah, hi Alicia. It's great to join you. Thanks a lot. Yeah, it's an interesting story. I'm the co-founder of the company, and we incorporated in March 2017. It seems like a lifetime ago now. And we primarily were, and still are, a research use only life science reagents company. And we have 60,000 products across our three brands. They're Genie brands: ElisaGenie, AssayGenie, and AntibodyGenie. And we have distributors all over the world. And we've been launching products for the last 3 years on a continuous basis, especially around the immunology area and immunology scientists in particular, to support them and work with them to give them the best tools possible so that they can do leading research and continue to break boundaries and barriers and to make the best discoveries.
Excellent. And so obviously, you know, you work closely with life scientists on the research they're doing, you know, the demands and what they need. So when it came to making this transition, was it something which came from your customers? Like how did the opportunity come about?
Yeah, that's a good question, actually. And I think we all underestimate the role serendipity plays in lots of things that happen in our lives. But as it so happens, we have some raw material suppliers in Wuhan, which happen to be the center of the virus outbreak. But so I've been there a few times, of course, visiting different facilities and manufacturing plants and so on and so forth. But I suppose really what happened was, coming up towards the end of last year and even more so early this year, there seemed to be an issue around the supply of certain raw materials coming out of Japan. And I suppose we have very good contacts there, and very close contacts that we've built up over a long period of time. And they warned us about that there is issue around supply. So I suppose that got us thinking, and then as it progressed, you know, I suppose as January progressed and up onto Chinese New Year, it became very much apparent that there was a viral outbreak. And this was becoming public news, especially in China, even though it wasn't Europe and the rest of the world. We hadn't really even discussed it that much. It wasn't really in the media then. And really, we were, I wouldn't say panic stations, but like a lot of our raw materials we couldn't source. So what that actually forced us to do was we to find alternative suppliers for a lot of raw materials, which, as it turns out, was a big help in us helping scientists all over the world for the next couple of months from our core product base, which are research use only products such as ELISA kits and antibodies and so on and so forth. But I suppose from there we realized that, and we were kind of warned and also realized that, you know, if this virus spreads, then there's going to be serious issues for Europe and the rest of the world. And therefore we decided to invest time and some resources in looking at potential diagnostic tests, just in case. So the first product we launched was a qPCR reagent, which we still supply, and we've exported to a large number of countries around the world. And that was our leading product to begin with. And then we looked at rapid testing. And I think that's really what we I suppose became synonymous with over the last maybe 6 or 7 months at least. What we started doing was we started developing a prototype and working with suppliers that had already developed raw materials for these products, and working on a prototype. But actually, what happened was the whole the coronavirus came at such a pace that we couldn't keep up with it, and therefore we ended up partnering with other manufacturers. So we were never a distributor of products. We always developed our own products with contract manufacturers, but it just happened so fast, and because of the regulatory issues around diagnostic products, we had to partner with manufacturers and actually distribute these products. And so we, out of our 60,000 products, we distribute 3. So it's a very small percentage. I can't even work out that percentage. But one of them, well, 2 of them really are rapid tests. One is a rapid antibody test, and I can chat to you if you'd like to find out, hear more about that. I'm happy to share more. And also more recently, a rapid antigen test. And once again, we kind of had to shelve the projects around developing our own products. Nevertheless, all the regulatory requirements and concerns were still very much apparent as we launched those products probably in March. And I think we're one of the first companies in Europe to launch such products.
So you've highlighted quite a key issue there, and that's the regulatory sort of concern. So Simon, I was then going to come to you on that as the expert in this area. So I mean, there's probably multiple things that a company making that sort of transition to the diagnostic field needs to think of. Sort of, what are the top ones that you'd like to highlight here?
Well, I think obviously the main issue was that up until then, Colm had been distributing research-only products, and thereafter he was suddenly involved in test kits that were going to be used on humans, and not only that, but something used on humans where, you know, the consequences of it not working are quite serious, or giving a false negative or a false positive are quite serious, or the possibility with a lot of these test kits of what the side effects might be. So Colm already had the regulatory issues coming in terms of authorization, but we then had to look at, you know, what additional contractual protection he needed in terms of buying the products and then reselling them into the market to the distributors who would then supply them to the users. So because this all had to be done really quickly, and therefore, you know, the 100% ideal protection from suppliers that you would normally want would not necessarily be practical to put in place, it meant crucially making sure that there was back-to-back protection in the contracts with the resellers, so that Colm and the company weren't going to end up as piggy in the middle. In other words, you're assuming you're not getting enough liability from the supplier, but unfortunately you're assuming greater liability when you pass on to the reseller. And this is a challenge that a lot of companies have got where they've moved into new areas to cope with Covid-19. And I think that ReagentGenie had an easier job because it's basically, in terms of the basic technology and regulatory framework, still operating in the same field. But where you've got, clothes companies that are suddenly making PPE, or breweries or distilleries that are suddenly making alcohol gel, they've moved into a completely different field. And as well as knowing what they have to do technically to produce the right product, they've had to learn what regulatory framework they have to operate in, because there's not much point in producing a hand gel or some protective clothing that in practical terms does the job, but it doesn't meet the NHS's minimum standards.
Okay, interesting. And what about sort of labeling requirements? I mean, presumably, so when you're supplying reagents and kits that are being used by scientists to conduct research compared to when, it's as to be used in a human, there must be a vast difference there in labeling as well.
Yes, you've got to make sure you comply with the labeling requirements in terms of what it can be used for. any authorizations that you need, and also obviously instructions as to how it is used properly. I know that Colm operates differently, and he can tell you a bit more about that in a minute, but I've heard anecdotally that the test kit that involves sticking a swab right down the back of your throat on your tonsils, a lot of people have found it quite difficult to do that without hitting the tongue or the roof of their mouth. So they're sometimes not sure they've even done it properly or whether it's worked. Now that's not a problem in practical terms with Colm, but perhaps he could shed some light on how his works.
Yeah, I think Simon, I suppose, firstly, Simon's has been very modest with the amount of help and how quickly he worked through the whole process, especially as it was peaking back in March, and we got some phenomenal support. And without him, it just wouldn't have been possible, because we really did need that regulatory and legal support, and I'm glad it was there. I suppose on the technology as well, yeah, I mean, antibody tests are typically a drop of blood, and they're applied to what we would describe as a lateral flow device, which is essentially a pregnancy test type style cartridge maybe. And the blood then migrates, with some buffer, migrates down along, and you get either a positive or a negative result, which is indicated by a line or multiple lines. So that's not very invasive. Well, of course, you take a drop of blood, but it's easier to work with in a lot of respects, although you have to still take the same biohazard precautions. I suppose for rapid antigen tests and also, of course, PCR testing, Simon indicated, that does require a nasopharyngeal swab, typically, which has to go down pretty deep down the cavity. And it's funny, Sam mentions, well, antigen tests were, I suppose, the first time they kind of came into public light was back, maybe Spanish government had problems, I think it was maybe June, July, where they sent back a lot of antigen tests. Now, interestingly, I don't know the ins and outs of it, but my feeling would be that depending on how the swab is taken, that might have an effect on the sensitivity and specificity of these assays. So once again, you take the swab, and the swab goes into a little vial containing a liquid, and from there it isolates the DNA and or RNA, and of course, coronavirus is an RNA virus, so you have the RNA in solution, and then you get a little bit of that solution, apply it to a very similar type device, which is like a pregnancy test again. And if the virus particles are present, you'll get a positive result, and if not, you'll get a negative result. And you do that in around 15 minutes. And just, I suppose, and finally, the difference between the antibody and antigen test. Antigen will detect whether the viral particles or viral proteins are present in the nasopharyngeal cavity, whereas the antibody test, you're actually measuring almost a past event, whether you've generated antibodies to an infection, in this case coronavirus, previously. And there's time limits and all that, of course, as well. So both are very effective depending on what you want to do. I suppose antibodies, you can tell if you have antibodies to the virus, and I suppose you can infer from that if you have some sort of immunity. And of course, the antigen test or PCR will theoretically determine whether you're currently have coronavirus. Yeah,
there is like you've highlighted sort of the different sorts of tests out there, and I think I guess the point of yours is it's a rapid point of care test, and so the antigen model was sort of selected on that basis, as you said, for an infection at the time, whereas the antibody is more sort of previous events, and perhaps if immunity is built up. But so in terms of sort of the accuracy and validity, so where there is an element perhaps of human error, so how do you deal with liabilities, Simon? How do you go about minimizing that extra risk?
Well, you allocate liability in the contracts. As I said, you don't pass on any more liability than you have received from the supplier. Now, under English law, you can't exclude liability for death or personal injury where you've been negligent. But what you have to do is make it very clear that what the level of accuracy of the test is, that it is subject to proper storage and use, what its shelf life is if necessary, and make sure that the distributor then assumes those obligations in reselling it. And obviously another issue is that, as well as the labelling being compliant for a test kit for what is therefore essentially a medical device of whatever classification, depending on the country that you're selling it in. You've got to meet the requirements in that country, and it also may mean where you're selling worldwide that the labelling and the instructions have to be in different languages. So all of this had to be done really quickly, and it's very kind of Colm to say how helpful we were here, but it is amazing in general, how quickly, and this was all the stakeholders in this, it's amazing how quickly everyone can work on something like this when they have to. And it's probably not an exaggeration to say that we managed to get several months worth of distribution network put in place in a few weeks. And that wasn't just because everyone was working around the clock, it was because everyone was suddenly managing to be more efficient as well. I mean, like Colm, I was aware from January that this was going to be a problem, and I had a nasty feeling that it was like one of those things you see on a documentary on the television about solar flares or asteroid strikes or tsunamis or super volcanoes, and they say, and scientists say, it's not a matter of if, but when, and you think, well, yeah, we know, it's not really going to happen, is it? And with this, suddenly it was a case of, and pandemics are the same, everyone's thinking, yeah, it's not really going to happen though, is it? And then, oh, it has. So I had a feeling in March when I came back from holiday that we were going to be locked down and we were going to have to hit the ground running on this.
It seems like there was both a bit of a run up there, wasn't there? Sort of, you mentioned, I know, Colm, you sort of had that issue with your supplies prior to all of this, so it's kind of that indication that a storm was brewing almost. Yeah, I mean, you've highlighted both some, the fact that it was a rapid transition. More in terms of sort of logistical considerations, Colm, and this is really interesting for thinking of making a similar transition, so anything that you can offer in the way of tips and tricks and everything like that. But what did you have to consider from sort of the logistical side, so workflows and capacity? Did you have to make sort of big changes in a small amount of time?
Oh, absolutely, incredible changes. Luckily, I'm very fortunate. I work with some great people. That goes for everybody from internal to contractors and, of course, legal team as well. And so very, very fortunate about that. And great investors. Everybody has been, extremely supportive. And that is the framework really for achieving what you want to achieve. But it doesn't mean that there wasn't any issues either. I mean, if I take you through it, I suppose we were dealing with, once again, I think probably being one of the first to market on from a public perspective, being, of course, the qPCR reagents are under our own brand, ReagentGenie, but distributing some of the rapid tests at the beginning, the antibody tests, the global demand was absolutely huge. I mean, we had hundreds and hundreds of inquiries every day. We don't normally get that many, and we have a good workflow to deal with what we do get. But when you're dealing with, say, 10 times the volume of inquiries, from a capacity perspective, we can't deal with that, but we want to help everybody. So that's the first thing we have to deal with. So we had to get new salespeople to help us. And you can imagine how difficult that is when there's a lockdown. It's restricting everybody's movements and so on and so forth. So we managed to get really, really good salespeople to help us with that. And so that was kind of one big bottleneck sorted, that we could kind of go, okay, we can segment and we can work on this and we can at least respond to everybody and give timelines and so on and so forth. And then the next part of it was getting the products in, which was a huge issue. And we're dealing with, like, our products, you can hold them generally in the palm of your hand, even the biggest ones. But after that, then we go from dealing with boxes coming in from, like, we get raw materials and we repackage and we do different functions in our office here. but going from, say, maybe a half a pallet to 10 pallets, what do you do in that case? So we had to deal with all the logistics. We had to do new boxing, packaging, storage, mapping of the facility, and then of course the logistics team had to work on all that, and they were really, really working around the clock and drafting in as much support as they could get to get us through it. And I have to say, we got, like, it's incredible. Like Simon, once again, I do think he's actually been a bit too modest here, because we take it from his point of view, where he said wasn't necessarily working around the clock. I think being able to condense that much work into such a short space of time requires a huge amount of dedication and help. And I know it was a global pandemic, so people were willing to help. We got incredible offers of support from suppliers we had never dealt with before, just very, very generous offers. And a lot of them, we took up on those offers, and it really, really helped us to, I suppose, reorganize our logistics operations to help us deal with this volume and meet demand as much as we could. And that was huge. But once again, going back to it, having excellent colleagues who worked really, really hard, think outside the box, come up with solutions, and also, everybody outside of that, including like legal and our regulatory consultant we were working with, and our investors and our board really, really supported and helped us get through it and come out the other side, which was basically a huge peak, and then it kind of settled down to some sort of normality again.
Another thing to add to any company that ends up branching out in this manner to meet the demand is talk to your insurers, because your existing insurance may not cover it, both in terms of the scope of the product and territorially. So, and again, this is probably less of a leap in terms of talking to insurers for ReagentGenie, though, of course, as I said, you're suddenly doing something that is not internal testing, it's human testing. But if you are a company, again, that is suddenly making PPE or alcohol hand gel, then you're certainly going to need to, and you may be selling in countries where you never used to sell, and countries like America where they can be quite litigious, so your underwriters are going to have alarm bells going off. You're going to want to involve your insurers from day one. And also, insofar as, all of these things, in terms of professional advisors, extra insurance, and the practical issues of sourcing and supplying the product are going to increase the expenditure, you're going to need to factor that into the price.
And
thanks.
Yeah,
oh, sorry,
and it's fine. Just following on from Simon, and I suppose your previous question as well, like, it wasn't so much, the transition for us was probably a lot easier than it would be for, and Simon had made some comments about, say, maybe a distillery moving into alcohol gels. Like, we are, of course, a life science reagents provider. So to make that move to diagnostics, like, technology is the same, it's proteins and antibodies. It really is looking at the regulatory and legal requirements. That is the core, and contractual and insurance. That's really the core issue. So technical is all fine, and like, we know the technology, but that really is where we have to rely very heavily on others.
So I suppose in terms of testing and QC requirements, nothing really changes there in that sense. The products are sort of been QC'd in the same way. Or?
Yeah, actually, it's because for our own products, we have a demanding QC procedure that we have to go through when we get the raw materials in and create the products. And I think we go above and beyond for the even research use only products to make sure that they're a good product. For diagnostics, because we're distributing, it's a little bit less in some respects, because all that is done. Now, we obviously have to take care that we send out a good product that's ready for sale, but it's just the QC is the responsibility of the manufacturer in that respect. So it's actually a little bit less, but then our legal requirements are more onerous, and our insurance requirements and so on and so forth.
And so what about branding? So you know, you're still in the same industry, but in terms of the sort of the branding strategy, were there any different considerations there? I don't know if Simon, you wanted to comment here.
Well, as you can see from Colm's backdrop, it's a very brand-aware company, and this is a good thing for a lot of companies, is to increase the market awareness and the book value of the company by not just having a brand for the company, but maybe brands for specific services and products. And Colm can talk about his personal experience in a minute, but in the COVID-19 crisis, it's been a sort of difficult balance to strike, because on the one hand, if you're a company moving into new areas, you might want to raise the awareness of this by getting extra trademark protection in extra areas, and also that will help protect you if anyone starts to sell rip-off products posing as yours, particularly if they're inadequate, and that can harm people as a result. But on the other hand, insofar as it's obviously a very commercial thing to do, apply for trademark protection, any company answering the call in the COVID-19 crisis doesn't want to look too opportunistic or mercenary. But anyway, Colm can tell you about his own personal experience here.
Simon's made some very good points there, and there would be stuff we would have considered. Like our core business has been and remains life science research use only products, and this year really, I suppose, major part of our core focus was meeting demand by vaccine and drug discovery scientists, which are our products, and we sell them under our brands ReagentGenie and ElisaGenie primarily. So recombinant proteins, spike protein for COVID, and antibodies to different viral particle proteins, and testing kits from a research use only perspective. So our brands have remained the same, and we have the same strategy. And we didn't really want to set up like any new brands or anything, because really for the COVID, the COVID products, especially the rapids, like at the beginning of the year, we did want to develop our own products, and we initiated that project, but as I mentioned earlier, it overtook us. So we started distributing those 2 or 3 products on our ReagentGenie brand, under our ReagentGenie brand, even though we're distributing for other companies. I suppose going back to that, we didn't want to be mercenary around it. We didn't want to set up a new brand or do anything like that, because we see this as a short enough term project to meet demand that just wasn't being met. And we're very fortunate to be in that position where we could do that. But I suppose it's not our core area, and our brand still remains strongly aligned to the research use only products. And we do have trademark protection, of course, around our own brands. But that's kind of really what our strategy has been and continues to be.
I think the conversation at the moment is really sort of helping to highlight the fact that during the whole sort of, the current situation, what's going on, the sector really has sort of pulled together and made an effort to divert resource and to really work together for the benefit of everyone. So, what you're saying, both of you are saying, it really sort of resonates with that and makes sense from what I've seen. Liaising with many life science organizations and just seeing examples in media and in social media. It's actually been, it's obviously been a really tough time, but seeing the successes of the sector as it pulls together has actually been, it's been a real positive, if you can take that out of it. And, Simon, you're just all of the expertise that you've brought in is just highlighting that, the importance of when you're making such a move and transition, thinking around the additional risks and considerations as well. So I think this is extremely useful for listeners who may be, thinking, hopefully we won't be seeing a situation like this anytime soon again. But in terms of, other areas, other therapeutic areas, there's so much more that, we need to work on as a sector. So it's been really engaging. But, in terms of, I just wanted to ask, about the enablers you know, what has been, in both your opinion, sort of the enabler for this transition? You know, you talk about people and you talk about technology and tools. What would you say has been one of the big driving enablers?
I would say probably all of the above. It's not really been possible without, you know, the technology, both the existing technology and the drive, whether it's in test kits, the vaccines that we're hearing a lot about, or antivirals, the drive to develop the new ones, and the people that are doing them, and the regulatory governmental frameworks in place to actually accelerate all that. So, as I said, it's amazing what people can do when they really have to. And, you know, I think this pandemic is going to be around for a while, probably, you know, on and off for next year, and it's not going to be the last one. So I think the lessons that everyone has learned and the innovation that we've acquired as a result of this are probably going to be, it's best to keep them in our pocket, because we're probably going to need them again.
Did you want to add anything there, Colm?
Simon's given a great answer. But I think it's true. I suppose the last part of it in particular, like, it's amazing what we can achieve when we all put our minds to it. And I suppose all the other global problems that we mull over and don't do anything about because we think we can solve it, well, I think just can, if we all get together and put our minds to it. It's incredible. I mean, a year to develop, not even a year to develop a vaccine, and probably another, all going according to plan, you know, another 6 months to deliver billions of doses is incredible, monumental achievement by the whole world.
Yeah, so just I'm sure for the benefit of all listeners, this podcast is well timed with some very exciting news this week. So yeah, I think that's a certain positive that's kind of given a certain amount of encouragement to anyone, really. So it was really, really, really positive indeed. And yeah, Simon highlighting sort of the accelerated kind of pathways that can exist is really important as well. And you know, it isn't the first pandemic, and it you know, it won't be the last. We don't want to dwell on that. So I suppose it's yeah, sort of discussions like these which really help to sort of, you know, when we're moving forward, maybe build in some more resilience when we look back at what's been achieved. So what, you know, you've achieved here with making that change in direction can sort of serve as sort of a lesson moving forward, like I say, to listeners and to other companies. What's next for ReagentGenie, Colm? What's in the pipeline?
Get through Christmas, I think, is the main one. No, seriously, the next range of products we're launching with, and really, I suppose this brings us up for the next couple of years, is moving into genomics and research use only genomics products. We've got some really exciting products coming out, and also to look to support our customers all over the world with regional bases. We've a very strong, we've very loyal customers in Asia and US, so to, you know, move into those areas, give local support as best we can, and really develop and launch more innovative products for the life science research community. That's really what drives us every day.
Excellent. Sounds really exciting indeed. So I think I just want to say thank you again to both Simon and Colm for sharing sort of the journey that they were on recently in enabling this sort of transition. And like I said, I think it's extremely useful for others listening in. And I also kind of want to congratulate you both as well for what's been achieved, and you know, sort of taking the time to share the case study, if you like, with others for the benefit really of helping others out. And just wish you continued success moving forward, and, you know, keep in touch and look forward to hearing more stories. And yeah, thanks to all listeners, and I'd like to wish everyone a good rest of the day. Thank you.
Thank you, and with luck, if we do an update, we can all be in the same room.
Indeed, yeah. That would be great.